Everyone knows the Transformers brand, an icon of the 80s that has maintained relevancy due to its iconic character design, innovative toy brand, and just an all-around detailed and beloved world of characters that have stood the test of time. I, along with so many people around the world, have grown up with and cherished these characters, and as popular as a brand like Transformers is, the claws of Hollywood will inevitably seek out and adapt any successful franchise regardless of legacy. It has certainly been a very strange time for cinema. Online discourse has a bigger influence on modern media than ever before, as well as having a hand in shifting public perception of future projects before they're even officially known to the public. And in this summer's huge list of several big budget and esteemed franchise releases, Transformers got a new film to not much fanfare outside of the traditional fan base. That's not to say it hasn't garnered any attention at all, quite the opposite. The marketing for this movie was everywhere.
Look who just showed up from the Transformers.
And the film certainly wasn't any less successful than previous releases. The total gross for the film as of being in the theater for only a month is roughly over $400 million. That's a pretty impressive number all things considered. But I personally haven't seen that many people talk about it in comparison to other major releases this summer, such as Indiana Jones, the new Barbie film, and the Oppenheimer biopic. It really makes you wonder considering the fact that the Transformers films are some of the biggest moneymakers on the planet. In 2007, Michael Bay's infamous adaptation of the property hit cinemas and became an immediate success. The film garnered over $700 million worldwide, and in total, Michael Bay's Transformers franchise have grossed over $5 billion. This is absurdly impressive considering the fact that these numbers put Michael Bay's Transformers films in the same category of success as The Lord of the Rings, Marvel Studios, and freaking Star Wars. Whether we want to admit it or not, these movies are immensely successful. Merchandise for these films ran rampant during its peak of popularity, and you couldn't turn your head without seeing Transformers in some capacity.
Have the power to protect the world from the destruction of the Decepticons.
Toy sales were through the roof and Michael Bay was living large. And it seemed as though anyone and everyone attached to these films were on top of the world at the time. Everyone except Transformers fans. While we look at franchises such as Star Wars and The Lord of the Rings with high respect and adoration, Michael Bay's Transformers films have gained a reputation of, well, to put it lightly, not being very good. These films are considered to be some of the worst movies ever created. They deserve to be studied and documented as a whole on the account of how bizarre they are. You can only really argue that one of the 5 films in this franchise is even close to being good at best. They have their moments for sure, but as a whole, the legacy of Transformers to the public eye quite literally transformed overnight to a beloved and simple story about robots in disguise, to nothing but overly complex stories of robots hitting each other to the point of sensory overload. Sensory overload, mind you, that's filled to the brim with sexism, racism, obnoxious moments, obnoxious characters, offensive characters, cliche story beats, American product placement, Chinese product placement, numerous spinning camera shots, numerous shots of the military, numerous shots of branded cars, numerous close-up shots of women's bottoms, overly designed robots, overly complicated scripts for no real reason, horrifying and morbid executions that deserve an NC-17 rating.
We surrendered! We're your prisoners! I mean, you know. Why did you...
King Arthur mythos, an overproportionate and runtimes that exceed lengths over 2.5 hours. I love Jetfire though, he gets to stay.
Living prime!
I don't think it's controversial to say that Transformers has a history of not being treated very well throughout the years. Michael Bay, being the auteur that he is, went on record to say that he didn't care much about feedback or criticism towards his vision of the franchise, that they will continue to make loads of money anyway, and he was sadly right. I'm not going to claim that Michael Bay hates Transformers. I see that going around a lot nowadays, but I do want to give him the benefit of the doubt here. At first, I'm sure he didn't necessarily care too much about the franchise, but as each film progressed, there were certainly improvements. Age of Extinction had a very insipid main cast of characters, but he did spend more time developing them than he ever did with those found in films 2 and 3. And while I enjoy Age of Extinction more, The Last Night wasn't as convoluted and agonizingly long as that film. Michael Bay has certainly grown an attachment to the brand after years of pouring his time into these movies. He appreciates the brand in his own way with his own voice. While they are still exhausting and visually noisy to the point of absurdity, Michael Bay does have a signature style that did give these films personality in some way. It wasn't good in my opinion, but the films did have a unique voice. Every director in some capacity has a unique style to their works that differentiate it from other filmmakers' visions, and Michael Bay isn't any different. Instead of going the familiar route, Michael Bay decided to take a full 180 and give us a foreign take on what we were familiar with. Designs being as complex and visually busy as they are, characters being unrecognizable to their original counterparts, do give the film a specific and recognizable tone, a style completely his own, and it's up to debate whether you enjoy it or not. However, it would be egregious to say that these films didn't connect with audiences in some way, because look at those numbers. It became a cultural footnote, and with it came amusement park rides, loads and loads of merchandise, and Michael Bay's Transformers further permeating our collective awareness.
This is a terrible pose. Do something else. No, now you just change sides. It's still bad. Do something totally different.
While the films were certainly successful, the critical reception as well as the general fan reception was anything but positive. The films were universally panned by critics, and as each installment passed, audience members knew exactly what to expect from a Michael Bay Transformers film. Here's the global box office information for each release. As you can see, the first 3 films did exceptionally well, with the 3rd film being the highest grossing of the trilogy at the time. The next installment followed suit by surpassing $1 billion, but the 5th installment was the first Transformers film to underperform drastically. So why is this? Well, at this time, fatigue of this franchise started to weigh in. The year was 2017, and audiences were much more different than ever before. General audiences were drained from these types of films, and many fans, myself included, clamored for a change. As each new installment released, the action got more tiresome, the characters got more formulaic and uninspired, and Michael Bay's style had finally run its course. You knew exactly what to expect from a lazy film like this. Military, guns, explosions, Optimus Prime having no personality. It was maddening. Now let me reiterate, I am not trying to sound overly negative. There are fans of this film and I am not trying to put you down. I can get the appeal, and like I listed before, there have been improvements. However, the drop-off was much too significant to ignore. The film reportedly lost Paramount over $100 million, and the film was deemed a commercial failure at the time. Sales momentum continued to drop shortly thereafter, and Michael Bay announced The Last Knight would be his final Transformers film. After the announcement of Bay's departure, many fans were left wondering what would happen to the cinematic franchise going forward. Many fans were anticipating a new release regardless, because in 2016, Transformers leader for Hasbro Tom Warner announced that 3 new projects were set to release in the next couple of years. One of these films would become Transformers The Last Knight, one would become the 6th mainline entry titled Rise of the Beast, which we will discuss later, and one of these films would be a spin-off prequel film focused on the character of Bumblebee. Many rumors started emerging that Michael Bay was bluffing and he would come back to direct. However, this was thankfully not the case, as in March of 2017, Deadline reported that stop-motion animator and director Travis Knight would be set to direct the spin-off, set to release in 2018. And only 18 months from the release of the last mainline Transformers film, audiences got their first look at Bumblebee. Before we talk about the new films, I just want to make a brief tangent on the design of the robots as a whole. The art of Transformer designs is truly underappreciated. Simplicity can be seen as good or bad when it comes to inherent character design. However, when it comes to Transformers, simplicity is its biggest strength. These characters never looked better than their original Generation 1 designs, and I'm sure the majority of fans will agree with me. This very simple blocky look lended to so much room for creativity when it comes to character design. It's iconic, unlike the jumbled mess of wires and metal that the Michael Bay robots are. It was much more focused, and the simplicity led to Marvel comic writers being able to express their creativity and give these robots unique personalities. The transformations were also very easy to understand. You can clearly see which part of the body transforms into each part of the vehicle, as opposed to just scraps of metal magically becoming a car.
What the fuck?
The designs also use simple lines that are easy to understand. When a child wants to draw Optimus Prime, the straight lines make it easy for them to understand and process. Unlike the Bayformers, good luck drawing that kid. They also give room for improvement and perfection of this style in future installments of the brand, such as the War for Cybertron games, the IDW comics, and the toy line as a whole. The colors were also bold and expressive. You can easily differentiate an Autobot or Decepticon from the crowd. Even with most being reused designs of previous bots, The colors were bold and striking enough to help give each robot a personality. The red and blues on Optimus Prime really pop, signifying a sense of leadership and heroism, while the grays and darker shades on Megatron express an imposing and mechanical look that is associated with villainy. They are also human enough to look familiar to the average eye, the windows being pectoral muscles, the slim and sleek female designs. This style is absolutely genius. Expressing why simplicity is the franchise's biggest strength is necessary to understand the filmmaker's mindset when it came to creating Bumblebee. With this film, you can tell the filmmakers wanted to return to basics. A key criticism of Michael Bay's Transformers films were that it was way too confusing, as well as visually and narratively busy, so the filmmakers made the smart move of restarting from scratch. Instead of a giant cast of Autobots and Decepticons, the film focuses on a small handful, rather than trying to flesh out more than a dozen human characters with their own motivations. Haley Steinfeld's character of Charlie is the central focus, and it allows the film to fully flesh out her character and relationship with Bumblebee, as opposed to sharing screen time with numerous other characters. Supporting characters such as her family are actually likable and contribute to the story, and one key improvement is the runtime. You aren't in the theater for almost 3 hours trying to process what you're looking at, as Bumblebee has a runtime of only 1 hour and 54 minutes, noticeably shorter than all of the Bay films. The biggest improvement of all, however, was a return to the traditional Generation 1 designs of the Autobots and Decepticons. One of the biggest flaws of the Michael Bay films were that designs were too messy and visually confusing. When the robots transform, they would just materialize into a car out of thin air. So the filmmakers of Bumblebee saw these criticisms and addressed them. When the first trailer of Bumblebee released, the first aspect everyone immediately talked about was the return to the G1 designs. It was, in all honesty, a very exciting time to be a Transformers fan, as it seemed as though the filmmakers and artists were finally giving fans what they have asked for years now. It was a perfect blend of the classic 80s cartoon mixed with live action realism. It also makes you wonder why they didn't go with this direction in the first place. Every single character looks absolutely amazing, and I cannot express enough just how ecstatic I and many others were about these new designs, especially Optimus Prime and Soundwave. I can gush about them all day. Now, I like to try to not let the fact that I am a Transformers fan color my assessment of the film as a whole, since personal bias can get in the way of proper film analysis, causing for some pretty unfair takes on the film's quality. However, I think the fact that I am a Transformers fan is important to this conversation, as I am basically the target audience for a film like this. Yes, I will admit that these films are dumb fun. I am a grown man who likes a franchise about giant robots hitting each other, okay? I have some self-awareness to realize this. But with all that being said, Travis Knight made the smart move to keep the film simple and small scale as a whole. Now, I am a personal fan of the director's previous works. Travis Knight is an incredibly talented stop-motion animator and has created and assisted with some of the best stop-motion animation projects of our time. He was the lead animator and producer for the 2009 film Coraline, which is one of my top 5 favorite movies ever made. He was also the lead animator and producer for other Leica projects such as 2012's Paranorman and 2014's Box Trolls. He made his directorial debut with the 2016 film Kubo and the Two Strings. He is now currently the president and CEO of Leica Studios. Bumblebee is now the second film he has directed, and once I heard he was helming the project, I certainly was much more optimistic about the film. You can immediately see the attention to detail when it comes to the transformations in this film. There's so much more expression in every single aspect of the animation. Characters don't just materialize into random vehicles, there's an actual method and art to this now. The story, on the other hand, isn't as complex as the previous films, but it also isn't that great. It's as basic and derivative of a story as you can get, but in my opinion, it works very well for this type of movie. Bumblebee is a film that wants to return to basics. It wants to reestablish the franchise for new audiences and older audiences who grew tired of the previous 5 films. Because of this, the writing remains simple and easy to digest for a general audience, but that also being said, there's just too much charm in its filmmaking to just dismiss it as a derivative spin-off. The film establishes a nice connection between Bumblebee and Charlie. The way Haley Steinfeld interacts with the obvious CGI Bumblebee is impressive and very believable. Her mannerisms, the way she scolds him, it's very convincing, and also really heartwarming seeing them grow together. It's truly a testament to her acting abilities. It's much more believable than Sam and Michaela. John Cena as an imposing antagonist is a lot of fun to watch. You can tell he's having a blast on set. He's also a much better actor than most people give him credit for. Having a smaller cast of characters really benefits the film as it gives so much room for each character to fully flesh out their personalities and motivations. And while there's not a lot of them, the action scenes are a major improvement from the Bay films, where in those films the action scenes are so packed with explosions and effects that you can't even process what you're looking at. These battles are much more small scale and again work well because I can actually see what's happening. The Cybertron scenes are also a lot of fun. We actually get a sense of tension between these two factions, and the action is shot and expressed well on screen. You can actually see what's happening. It's such a concept. Overall, it's a solid, competent film that isn't anything groundbreaking, but I'm sure most people, including the filmmakers, knew this is exactly what Transformers needed, and it works. I understand that my very positive response to this film at the time and now can be because of how drained I am from the Bay films. So a Transformers movie that is at best good and at worst unoriginal seems like an absolute masterpiece. This can also explain why the Metacritic and Rotten Tomato scores might be a bit artificially inflated, since audiences are so used to this.
Let me just stop you! Alright, that's
Bumblebee was a major improvement and showed audiences that a Transformers film can actually be a lot of fun. And honestly, that's all Transformers needs to be. Yes, these films can be so much better and the potential is astronomical for deep and adult stories like the IDW comics and cartoon shows. But the films returning to basics and just being fun summer blockbusters is a solid departure from the mess that Bay left behind. I'm more than happy that Travis Knight and the crew actually cared and delivered a solid movie. That is completely unheard of for these films. Box office for the film wasn't anything too amazing, but it did do well enough to show the studio that people enjoyed this direction. The film acted as a hard reboot minus a handful of small Bayverse references.
You telling me you could have been a Camaro this whole time?
And because of the film's moderate success, a sequel was planned and set to premiere not too long after this one. So here it is, folks. After Travis Knight lifted the franchise back on its feet, it was up to director Stephen Caple Jr. to continue the momentum of Bumblebee with the franchise's new first official mainline entry. So did it deliver? Transformers Rise of the Beasts premiered on June 9th, 2023, and it is the first film in this new era of post-Michael Bay Transformers films. So is it any good? Yeah, it's pretty good. This is, in my opinion, the best mainline Transformers film excluding the '86 movie. It is a very solid departure from Michael Bay's films and holds up with a solid cast, solid pacing, great action, great new Autobot and villain leads, and an all-around fun and upbeat personality that elevates it above previous entries. What I love about this film is the urban aesthetic and personality that the film exudes. The story takes place in 1994 and has a ton of throwback music reminiscent of the time, similar to Bumblebee, which took place in 1987 and therefore had a strong 80s vibe.
And Cool's teaming up with a good balanced breakfast.
Rise of the Beast wears its era on its sleeve, and that's pretty charming to me. The references are just easy references, but a lot of it is fun and comes off as natural and not forced. The story is, again, not much to write home about. It's a basic MacGuffin plotline where the characters need to search for mystical artifacts in the form of 2 keys in order to stop the bad guys from unleashing the giant planet-eating monster of Unicron onto the world. It's wonderful to see Unicron properly adapted to the big screen, but this storyline has certainly been done to death. This is where the film in some ways does feel a bit corporatized. I feel as though the studio was scared to have a plot that's more complicated due to the fear of it backfiring like the Michael Bay films, so they co-opted a basic story that would please the general audience. And while the story isn't the strongest aspect, it is certainly carried by the characters and their performances. Optimus Prime is pretty great in this movie. I know a ton of people weren't the biggest fan of his portrayal, saying that he's more in line with Michael Bay's adaptation of the character, which everyone hated, but I would argue against that point. Optimus Prime is a humble, kind-hearted, and compassionate leader who makes tough decisions, yet doesn't default to violence and hatred. He knows when to be a strong and determined leader, but also when to be empathetic and caring. His humility and compassion is why everyone adores this character to begin with. He is everything a strong leader should be, and most people argue that he's way too violent and bitter in this film, which I disagree. His version of Optimus Prime feels a sense of guilt for stranding his fellow Autobots on Earth. Because of this, he is a bit more grumpy and even untrustworthy of humans. To be fair, it doesn't matter how kind-hearted you are, this much responsibility and war would take a toll on anyone. And he proves to be strong and able to make tough decisions just by how serious he is taking the situation. He isn't a jerk to his team. He's focused and determined to get back home, which any good leader would be, putting his team before himself. Spoiler spoilers, by the way, I completely forgot. I'm gonna spoil this movie. Bumblebee gets killed off for the majority of the film. So because of his friend's death and his feeling of helplessness when it comes to the overwhelming power of the Terracons, it's no wonder Optimus Prime is a bit more unhinged. But he also isn't the heartless killing machine like the Bay films. I understand not everyone will be okay with this interpretation. However, I do believe it works for the film as it gives more depth and makes Prime much more interesting. I like seeing him as flawed. I love seeing him challenged in these sort of ways. I love seeing this character still persevere because at the end of the day, Optimus Prime isn't a perfect character. We can idealize him in our heads all we want, but he does struggle just like every good leader does. What differentiates him is his humility and compassion that's certainly present in this film. We also have 2 more films to see his character grow. Again, I don't think it's the end of the world like a lot of people made it out to be, but you also can't deny that it isn't at least a little badass to see his final fight with Scourge. As for the other Autobots, I thought they were a ton of fun. RC was great every minute she was on screen, and Mirage really surprised me with Pete Davidson giving a pretty fun performance as the comedic relief of the film. He was never annoying and had some of the best lines in the film. Bumblebee is the only main issue I have with the movie. His death was pretty unnecessary in my opinion. I understand this was to give Optimus Prime motivation to pursue the Terracons, but I feel as though they could have come up with something better, as his absence is noticeable and drags the film down a bit since you know he's just gonna come back. I mean, they're not gonna kill off one of their most popular character guys. Every scene he was in though was a lot of fun. The human characters, to my surprise, were also pretty good. Noah Diaz was a likable protagonist. You're immediately on his side with his current situation, and you want to see him succeed. The actor has a ton of charisma, and I do hope to see him in more future projects. The female lead is also pretty good. She has great chemistry with the actor, and both really do work well together in the movie. It's nice to see her not just pushed to the side, as she does have a major role in the film. The Terracons were also well done. They aren't super three-dimensional characters, but Scourge's presence was very imposing and well acted by Peter Dinklage. The big addition to this film was without a doubt the debut of the Maximals, the main characters of the beloved 90s cartoon Beast Wars. Every time Optimus Primal was on screen was some of the best parts of the film. Ron Perlman does a fantastic job voicing the character and was a great counterpart to Optimus Prime. My only issue is that I wish they were utilized more in the film. They weren't around often and really only show up for the second and third act. I mean, the film is literally named after them. Nonetheless, they were a welcome addition and I do hope they get utilized more in future installments. Rise of the Beast isn't the best blockbuster ever made. It isn't even the best blockbuster of the summer, but the highs do hit high enough that it can't be argued just how much fun this film is to watch. Stephen Caple Jr. did a solid job keeping the momentum that Travis Knight started. It's certainly the most underappreciated summer film of the year, and it has a lot going for it, and it delivers with all the fun you could ask for in a Transformers film, minus all the exhausting filler you would expect from these movies. The Transformers franchise started out with Michael Bay at the helm. A beloved icon of the 80s was modernized into some of the most polarizing, albeit memorable action films of the past couple decades. He created so many of these that even he admitted it was time to stop, left the helm, and left fans absolutely dumbfounded by the experiences that he created. And in the giant scraps of metal that sat the Transformers franchise, rose a little film that could in the form of Travis Knight's Bumblebee, which then turned into a pretty solid redemption in the form of Rise of the Beasts. I am more than happy that we have genuinely good Transformers films being made now. It took a little while, but anything truly is possible, and let's hope that it can continue that momentum in the future. While Michael Bay's films are certainly controversial for a number of reasons, let's be thankful we even got to experience such a wacky and bizarre take on this property to begin with. For as confusing and exhausting as they are, a part of me will miss the blatant product placement and spinning camera shots. A part of me will miss the complex designs and genuinely fun moments they had to offer, but a part of me is also very thankful that Transformers have proper films being made now. Films that can hopefully turn the public perception of the brand from this
I am directly below.
Enemy scrotum.
to this.
I gotta let you go.
Thank you
So much.
for giving me my voice.
Thank you for making me feel like me again.
Transformers is a franchise that continues to stay relevant due to its incredibly iconic and memorable characters, toys, and films. And for better or worse, this franchise will continue to thrive through the passion of its creators, and especially the passion of its fans.